Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Steelers Draft Talk. I'm your host, Steelers DB. With me is my good buddy, Nick Martin. Today, we're going to be breaking down some edge rushers in the 2023 NFL Draft class, giving, our thoughts on the class overall, our top five guys, breaking their strengths down, weaknesses down, all that stuff. First, how we doing, brother?
I'm doing great, man. Had a bit of an interesting time watching the edge rushers. A lot of highs, a lot of lows. It was
Yeah,
it was a
yeah,
time.
it's an interesting class. I feel like through the season, like through the college football season, I was really, really intrigued by the edge rusher class. And I thought this was going to be like, one of those like really special classes. And then when I kind of dove deep into a couple of the guys that I felt like were getting a lot of hype or that I saw, producing at a high level, I was honestly a little bit underwhelmed by some of their tape, just if we're being honest. But I still think the class overall is good. It might be more depth good than
Yeah,
top heavy good
I
though. And
was.
that's not what I was expecting like when I was diving into a bunch of these guys. I think I've watched somewhere around like 10, 11, 12 guys, like 3 games so far. So I probably won't get much deeper than that in the class, but there's a handful of guys that are getting mocked on day 3 that I've watched that I actually quite enjoy. So
Jose Ramirez is that guy for
yeah,
me. I
yeah.
like him.
There's a couple of those guys, man. I don't know if I'll actually end up like writing up any of those guys for the site or anything, but this class has depth. I will say that it's definitely as deep as advertised. I just don't know if the top end guys impressed me as much as I was, I guess, anticipating headed into it. But still a lot of good players to talk about. Um, let's get into just some honorable mentions. So we'll go 5 through 1 like normal. Who was the guy that just missed out on your top 5 list?
It was Miles Murphy, and I tried my hardest to like his film. Even going back to his 2021 stuff, I think I watched about 6 games combined from 21 and 22. And in those games, what was so frustrating about watching him is he doesn't play with a lot of violence for a guy his size. And when it comes to pass rushers, I particularly when I'm not this type of person who likes, always looks for the bendiest guys. A lot of times I look for, can you just soften a corner? Can you convert speed to power consistently? But I need a level of violence when I'm watching you play, and Miles Murphy did not do that for me. The problem I had with him constantly was he was trying to convert speed to power. He barely makes any forceful like jolt on contact, which was a huge problem for me. And there's just so many instances as a run defender where he is just like he looks like he has shorter arms than he actually does, and he ends up just kind of grasping for air as he tries to like get these like, and he has many moments where he outruns the angle, and then he ends up like just absolutely stopping his momentum flat and doesn't hustle back to the guy like hit. I don't know if that's a change direction thing, but those types of plays for me with Miles Murphy were really hard to overlook. The thing I like about him the most is I like how he works off the long arm into the club move. I think it's his best, like, most consistent pass rush trait for sure. But there's just not enough there for me to fully fall in love, which is disappointing because I really like a player with his type of measurables. And that's what made this so frustrating.
Yeah, well, I got some thoughts on Murphy. I'm gonna hold off on those until we get into the top 5. He is in my top 5. I will admit, we have some of the same concerns, even if we do view him a little bit differently.
Yeah.
I would say the guy that I debated putting him at 5, and I don't know, maybe I was just too big of a coward to do it, but um, is a guy that I liked back in the summer, Will McDonald from Iowa State. McDonald is a really interesting build for an edge rusher. I think he's about 6'3", only about 240 pounds. I think he actually weighed in at like 245 at his pro day yesterday, which was nice because it was, I think, 5-6 pounds heavier than he was at the combine. But at the combine, he was 6, so he said that he had lost a couple pounds because he was throwing up. before they did their testing and
He
stuff.
was doing his drills in a hoodie too, so like all like his like 4.640 was like with like resistance dragging him
Yeah.
down, and I was just like, yeah, that guy can run.
Yeah, he can really move. He's an explosive dude, man. Like I think he's got a really quick step. He's a good bender on contact. 35-inch arms. I think he can use that length a little bit better than he does right now. Um, the thing with him is he just played so out of position. But when I felt like he was able to get in a 2-point stance and line up like in a wide nine, even though those reps were few and far in between, I just thought, man, this is what this dude could be at the next level if you allow him to really get after the passer instead of having him with his hand in the dirt, playing over guards, playing over tackles head up. I just thought that he was used differently than I would have preferred him to be used in college. I will say that I think that will help his run defense at the next level just because he's so used to having to like stack shed blocks, having to play against bigger opponents.
Getting
Um,
doubled.
Getting double teamed. So I like that. I still don't see him as a plus run defender, but I think that there's enough already as a pass rusher there to be a good player. And um, another thing with him that I just wish he was a little bit younger. Like he's 24 years old, and like some of this stuff is a little bit of a projection with him just because of how he was used in college. Like I said, I do think he needs to develop more moves as a pass rusher, use his length a little bit better. But when you're 24 years old, and he's played a lot of ball, like he's been around for a long time. He's been a household name for a long time. So what the ceiling is there, I don't know. I'm really intrigued by him though. I really wanted to put him 5. I was just too big of a coward to do it. So without further ado, let's get to your number 5 guy. Who is it?
It was your guy, BJ Ojulari. I was a little bit conflicted on Ojulari overall, but I actually, I like a lot of his highs in terms of his, I think he has a really good arsenal of pass rush moves. He's constantly experimenting. The thing that was a little disappointing is he doesn't work enough off his long arm, and I think that's something he needs to do more of because he has this wingspan. He's got to use it because when you watch him as a run defender, he's getting washed down way too much as someone who, if you have him as the play side defender, you're probably going to run right at him, and a lot of teams tried to do that with Ojulari. And big thing with me is I like him as a pass rusher. I don't know if I love him right now as a pass rusher versus what he is as a run defender. Biggest thing for me, I think he does a really good job of softening edges with his hands. I think he's got some very good bend as well. It's not. I don't want to sound nitpicky, but I'm this kind of person who I look to see just like how low you can get yourself and how you keep your balance like through contact. Ojulari does enough for me, but I do think he needs a little bit of a runway with his hands to get around the edge consistently. His speed to power is underrated. I think it's something he needs to rely on more often because he just doesn't utilize his length, his leverage as much. And I think that's where you could see him access a lot more power. The thing I like about him, he's only 20 years old. Like he's definitely got a lot of room to grow. He's definitely someone who has potential overall. Definitely one of those guys in the latter part of the first round, early second round, where I see a team taking a chance on him, and I get it. I definitely understand it. But for me, I think he was a little bit too inconsistent for me overall to fully fall in love with him like you did.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll get to Ojulari a little bit later. He is a little bit higher on my list. But we do see him pretty similarly, I think. My number 5 player, this is a guy, man. I think this was my Miles Murphy for you. I tried to look at this player and see what I feel like everyone else is seeing, and it's Tyree Wilson. I'll start with the positives. Really unique frame, obviously 6'6", 271, unbelievable length, 35, I think, and a half-inch arms. I mean, just unbelievable length at his disposal. He packs a surplus of power. Very productive, 50 pressures. I think a 22.7 pass rush win rate, which was really impressive. If he can get his hands into your chest, the rep is usually over. He's capable of bulldozing like right through you on the way to the quarterback or to the running back, depending on the play. Hands pack a pop. I feel like he does a good job keeping his hands free and disengaging from blockers when they get their hands on him first, to establish that first significant contact. He's fluid enough of an athlete to run down plays from the backside when he was left unblocked. I feel like he has good range as a tackler. There were some reps where I didn't think that he was going to be able to get into the play, but he was able to, close that gap, close that distance, get there quickly. Um, I think that there were some encouraging reps maybe that I wasn't anticipating of him being able to change directions on like inside counters that looked a little bit different for a guy that's his size. Plays with a violent play style. I think on twist and just in general, working inside is probably where I honestly like him most in terms of just obvious pass rushing downs. I felt like, when they got him lined up over like the B gap, I felt like he was able to kind of wreak havoc in there. Some of my concerns, way too many false steps off the line of scrimmage. I think his get off is really underwhelming for a player that's, as explosive as I feel like everyone else kind of thinks that he is. And he does show some explosion, obviously, upon contact. Just doesn't consistently threaten the outside shoulder of tackles. And I'm not sure that he ever will. Flexibility was modest. I wouldn't call him extremely stiff, but I do kind of lean more towards that way. Needs to continue refining his hands, keeping his hands ready, just as a pass rusher, and develop like more of a well-rounded move set. And my main thing with him too is like he's obviously going to be a guy I think that's going to win with a lot of like speed to power and just power moves in general, using that length, using that long arm. But can he play with better leverage? I mean, he's 6'6". I feel like he's a really upright type of rusher at times. And I felt like some of that time, I felt like he was giving away some of his power to offensive tackles, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
Wilson to me is a guy like I was anticipating a lot more on the film. I don't think he's a bad player. I am surprised, I guess, that there seems to be big draft media guys or NFL teams that view him as a better prospect than Will Anderson. I don't personally see it. I'm very surprised that that's even a discussion. Even for this time of year where there's always, surprises, I guess. This is just one that I can't wrap my head around. I'm sorry. So,
Yeah.
let's go to number 4. Who was your number 4 guy?
So it works out perfectly. I get to talk about Tyree Wilson because
Okay, there we go.
big thing with me. I mean, you pretty much hit many of the nails on the head. I think one of the biggest concerns I have with him is how upright he is on contact, because he gives away his chest way too often. He makes it such an easy target for offensive tackles, and like guys with better hands, they're not gonna let you just tee off and just get into their chest. Like he needs to improve with being able to shed off that contact consistently. I'll tell you something I love though, and it's how violent he plays. And that's something I really appreciate about his game overall. It doesn't matter if he's getting doubled, he's doing his best to work through that double. There was a play against NC State where like he's going through the tackle and he like sheds around the guard, and then he's able to get the zag, and I'm just like, this guy's like, he just has a ferociousness to his game that I really appreciate. Speed to power is his calling card, and I like, I like guys who can really convert speed to power well. I think with Wilson, it's a little bit of a tough projection because he's not like a Trevon Walker for me, where he was this NFL ready-made run defender. Tyree Wilson's not bad as a run defender, but I don't think he understands enough about scheme to like, he's going to overrun quite a amount of plays where he gets out of his gap and he's going to be left out of position. So he's going to have to learn some of the nuances of scheme, I believe, because I think that's one of the things that I notice more than anything. You can kind of play him up and down the line. Like if you just line him up against guards, there's so many guards who just don't know what to do with a guy like that powerful. Like you said, the false steps are so concerning because he robs himself of his get off every single time, and you wonder just like, could he beat a guy, more consistently with his get off and, cause him to overset more? Because he really, I honestly think he does have that explosion. I just don't think it shows itself because he's constantly false stepping. And it's not like just one false step. He's taking like two or three like off the line. It's ridiculous how raw he is in that regard. He's pretty raw with his hands overall. He tries to work, you know, you know, attacking the wrists of offensive linemen. He understands that enough. But the biggest thing for me, he has to learn how to soften corners, because if he can, I think his bend is overrated by his believers, and I think it is underrated by his naysayers. I think he's a guy who, if he can soften the edge, he can actually take advantage of corners that guys his size typically can't. He's like somewhere between like a Gregory Rousseau and I think he's a little bendier than a Rousseau, so I'm a little split on him. I think he has more edge 2 ability, but I do see the potential for him to be an edge 1. But like you said, this top 5 talk is ridiculous. I just don't understand it at all. He's just so raw. He's 23 is not too bad of an age to be as a rookie, but he's played a lot of football and he's still incredibly raw in the nuances of the game. So I don't quite understand it overall.
Yeah, he's a tough one for me. Like I said, I just it's one of those situations where I'm just like sitting back looking at the tape and I'm like, how did we get this guy in the same conversation as Will Anderson? I don't know. Anyway, enough of that. I still think he can be a good player. Like, I definitely think he's a starter. Like, he is a starter in the league. I don't know that he's ever going to be a high impact player, much less a guy that's going to be taken in the top 5 picks of the draft. I don't see it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. My number 4 guy was Myles Murphy. Murphy, 6'5", 270 pounds, a very good athlete who is expected to test like a freak athlete, but we didn't get to see him test at the combine.
Dealing with the hamstring currently since January.
Yeah, so we kind of an underwhelming process. He was somebody, in my opinion, that needed to nail this process, not just because, I don't want to take too much into testing numbers, but like, he was a guy that was built as a freak, and there are times on film where he looks like that, and then there are other times where I just think it just kind of goes away, and I'll kind of get into that and the negatives. But really like his first step off the ball. I think he's relatively twitchy, especially for his size. I'm just not sure how much they let him kind of go and unleash off the ball. Like, there was a lot of times where I felt like he was holding back, and I'm just like, dude, what are you doing? Length is just modest, but he does a good job long arming his way. Can push the pocket with that, especially when he lands at the right spot. Moves well laterally for a guy his size. I mean, I've watched him in space, against like Boston College, against like Zay Flowers, like track guys down in space, which is, really impressive for a guy with his build. I think he's pretty strong. He can convert speed to power. Just needs to be more consistent. He has some bend up the arc upon contact. Thought his play against the run was solid. I don't think, I've seen Trayvon Walker. I guess that's just the comp for draft Twitter these days. I've seen Trayvon Walker as the comp for him. Trayvon was a very good to great run defender coming out of college. It was honestly the best part about his evaluation, aside from his just athletic traits that you were betting on. I think Murphy's a solid run defender. I don't think that he's not Trayvon Walker, though. He's a very flashy player whose best reps look as good as any edge rusher prospect that you'll find. I mean, there are times where he'll just bulldoze tackles. There are times where he'll win the edge just with ease. He was an instant impact player, too, the second he stepped foot on campus. He's been a guy that's been on the draft radar for years now, even though he's an underclassman coming out of college. My negatives for him is, where was the development in 2022? I watched this guy over the summer and I was like, okay, the tools are there. You just kind of need to see more consistency. He needs to add counters. He needs better pass rush plan.
I feel like a lot of that happened with the Clemson prospects too.
Like, where was it? I literally didn't see it. I actually thought, when I watched this 2022 tape, I watched 2 games of 2022 and then, went back and watched, like, a pressure clip of him, from YouTube, and I didn't really see the same type of prospect that I saw in 2021, so then I went back and watched 2021, watched the Florida State game. I think I watched, was it my no, I watched Miami of this year, but I went back and watched some 2021 tape, and I'm like, this tape is better than the 2022 stuff. So where was the development? I think he gets too upright too as a rusher and a run defender. Um, his production just runs way too hot and cold. Like I said, some of that may be scheme or what he's being coached to do, what he's being allowed to do. But for a guy that talented and you see the flashes, it's just very frustrating that you don't get it consistently. With him, you're betting on athletic traits and your development. So this is a guy who I don't think the tape says first round player anymore. Just me being completely honest. I think that if you take him, within the top 20 picks, you're being really confident in your development with him. But, they say bet on traits. I agree that you need to bet on traits, especially at edge rusher. He has the traits to be a really good player. I just don't think he's a very, very good player right now, which you mentioned that with the Clemson guys. I definitely felt the same. When I watched
The loss of Brent Venables
Simpson,
hurt too.
yeah, when I watched Simpson, when I watched Brzee, when I watched Miles Murphy, I just even KJ Henry, I don't think that um a lot of those guys got better this past season. And I don't know. I don't know what that was, or there's probably a lot of variables that we're not really thinking of at this moment, but I was just a little bit underwhelmed by his tape. But um number 3, who was your number 3?
I just want to add one last thing on
Yeah, go
Miles
ahead.
Murphy. The best game film I watched was 2021 against Wake Forest, where he was going up against Zach Tom, who I liked quite a bit in the process
Yeah,
last
he's a good
year.
player.
Yeah, and that's probably the game where he showcased most of his violence. Like he was able to drive Tom back. He was able to win the edge at times, like not consistently, but I saw that's where I was seeing like the type of player that people are hyping him up to
Yeah.
be. So like that game for me kind of like sticks out in my mind is like the one that I get the hype around him, but it's not consistent. And a lot of his moments of speed to power is against like tackles from Furman and the Citadel. And I'm just like, it's not
Yeah.
moving me.
Not
There's a lot of
translatable.
terrible pass sets too in that Florida State game. It's atrocious to watch for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what all I want to add. Now I get to talk about one of my favorite players. Number 3 for me is Will McDonald. I am a huge
Ooh,
fan of Will
okay.
McDonald. Will McDonald for me, um, despite playing as like a 4-eye a lot of the time, whenever he was lined up on the edge, I actually did not think this guy was this liability as a run defender that people thought, because I think he uses his leverage with his length better than people think. As a run defender, he controls the line of scrimmage. He knows how to stack and shed. Like you said, playing as the 4-eye a good amount of times, you learn those things. And I think he just gets a little undisciplined out of his gap, but I think it's very fixable stuff with him. I do think the play strength was a little bit underwhelming, especially like in the legs. Like he lacks quite a bit of sand in his pants, and the loss of weight at the combine was unfortunate. Due to like I believe it was like food poisoning or something like that.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know. I caught a side conversation of his as he was walking off the podium, so that was how I figured that out, and I know
yeah, I
everybody
got you.
kind of got that afterwards. So
I got you. Well, something I really like about Will McDonald, I'm a guy. So this was a quote from I believe Ross McCorkle of Steelers Depot, who interviewed Darnell Wright, who called his Will McDonald's pass rush style unorthodox in terms of his speed to power. And he does have some speed to power to his game. I think people really understate just how much he can win in that regard. I think the biggest thing for me is he just doesn't use the long arm stab enough as a pass rusher. So that's one of the things I'm a little I want him to implement into his game more. But the big thing with me, I just really enjoy watching this guy rush the passer. I think he has much better hand usage than he gets credit for. There's a lot of like ability to like swipe at the hands. He keeps himself clean, but he doesn't always need a clean alley. He'll rip right through like the apex, like the apex of his rush at the top, and he just takes like the tightest angles towards the quarterback and just finishes consistently. And I'm not a guy who like, obsesses over Ben, but Will McDonald has enough like there as a pass rusher with his hands and his pass rush plan overall. There's a sense of randomness with him. Like he has some moments where he just spins in place and I'm just like, what are you doing? But like he developed that spin move to kind of like keep tackles from like oversetting him consistently, and he makes it work. And a lot of the unorthodox nature of his pass rush actually reminds me of a guy I love studying a lot, is Danielle Hunter of the Vikings, and I
That's an
really see a
interesting.
lot of that in his game. I think there's so much to work with McDonald, and I think just adding a bit more weight to him will go a long way. There's length, there's speed, there's rare levels of bend, there's enough hand usage, and I think there's enough as a baseline run defender that I feel comfortable taking him in the first round.
My number three guy is BJ Ojolari. I loved watching BJ Ojolari's tape. He was a really fun study for me. 6'2", 248 pounds, 34-inch arms. I think Pro Football Focus had him at like a 19 pass rush win rate. First thing with him, A plus character, A plus intangibles. Everything you read on this kid is like overly glowing. You already mentioned that he was 20 years old. Quick get off from the line of scrimmage, can consistently threaten the outside shoulder of the tackle. He can bend through the arc upon contact. Ankle and lower body flexibility is a plus. A wide assortment of pass rushing moves. I mean, the deepest bag of pass rushing moves in this class, in my opinion. Ghost speed to rip is his go-to at the moment. He is a pure speed rusher in all forms. Flashes of him using his length as a changeup, but this seemed to be very matchup dependent to me. He didn't use his length nearly enough, but there were flashes where I was like, okay, I can see how this is going to be a weapon moving forward. Really fluid mover in space, changes direction at the drop of a hat. Very sound pass rush plan, knows how to set tackles up, can sequence moves together. And he also does a good job setting tackles up for moves later in the game. There are flashes of him just absolutely taking over games, which I appreciate. I think back to the Georgia game from this past season where he was giving Broderick Jones hell.
Best game.
Yeah, so he's a really interesting player to me. I know some people view him as a designated pass rusher only. That could potentially be in his future. I think he needs to get a little stronger in his lower half to hold up better against the run. I know some people have concerns about his like want to in the run game. I don't really see that. I just saw him get washed out of a couple too many plays. He struggles to shed blocks. Just overall, needs to get stronger, particularly in his lower half. But he will shoot gaps. He will use his quickness to get in there and make plays in the backfield. Has a false step at the line of scrimmage. It's a very subtle one, but it could take his get off from, really good to elite territory, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, just the lack of power is a little bit concerning, but I'm interested to see if he can get a little bit stronger. Again, only 20 years old, so he's relatively early on the runway in his development. I just think when you combine the character, the production, the pass rushing toolkit already, it's enough for me to get on board in round one for sure, especially in this class.
I definitely get it. Like I think we kind of see it's interesting because we have Ojolari and Will McDonald kind of flipped, but I feel like I see a little more in McDonald. You see a little more like in Ojolari. So, but I think we see similar things overall with like their games. It's just we have a little bit of a different projection.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, who's your number two?
I think we have the same number two, and
Yeah.
I said early on back in the process, I was like, I don't understand why Nolan Smith isn't consensus edge two for most people, because I watched Nolan Smith. He is as ready made as a run defender as it comes. He comes from Georgia. His size size concerns do not matter to me if you can just handle your own in the run game, both with being able to handle whatever scheme gets thrown at you and being able to hold the point of attack and set the edge as a run defender. That's something he does so well. He has very violent hands-on contact. I think that's one of his underrated traits, and converts speed to power pretty well overall. But you're not drafting this dude to be a run defender. You're drafting him for his upside as a pass rusher. And I'm not, I'm always a little hesitant on raw pass rushers. Travon Walker, I had him as my number 3 guy last year, but I understood a lot of the talk around him because of the way he used his hands as a run defender, and the fact that Georgia's scheme doesn't really let you attack. It's a lot of stunts and loops. It's actually crazy, like how many stunts they run per game and how they try to free up their guys. But when Nolan Smith is attacking from a wide 9, he will just straight up dip under you, no speed lost whatsoever, and he will just absolutely wreck your game plan. He is one of those guys who has some of that ridiculous bend you look for in a pass rusher, and then you combine it with his otherworldly testing, which was slightly shocking to me, but it was slightly unshocking because I'd expected him to be a freak. But 4.38 at 238 pounds, we've never seen that before. And I watched some of the tape against Anthony Richardson. When Richardson tried to like go outside the pocket towards Nolan's side, he was just holding contain. There's just no way for an athletic quarterback like that to be able to like straight up outrun him because he's just that fast. So when you think about like, the athletic quarterbacks in today's age with Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, all these guys, a guy like Nolan Smith is so valuable as a contained guy and just being able to keep those guys under wraps. But like I said, you're drafting him for a pass rush upside, and when it comes to his hands as a run defender, I feel encouraged enough to believe that his development can go underway in a way that he can live up to his potential, which is why I have him as my edge too. I just think there's way too many high level traits, and I bet on pass rushers with traits, especially guys like Nolan Smith, every single time.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, I know everyone's going to see the sack numbers from last season. Maybe he didn't take the jump that people were anticipating just in terms of box score production before he got hurt and tore his pec. But it's important to note, like, it's a little bit of a smaller sample size, but he actually leads this draft class in pass rush win rate, like 25% pass rush win rate. And he was that productive without a real toolkit of moves. Like
Yeah.
Nolan really doesn't, in my opinion, have a idea on how to win as a pass rusher beyond just his overall athleticism. And the fact that he's already that good and productive in the SEC against like really good competition was the numerical argument, in my opinion, for him to be taken high in this draft class. But, 6'3", 240 pounds, really light for an edge rusher, but freakish athletic ability. You mentioned the speed to roam sideline to sideline, closes pursuit ankles instantly, insanely hot motor, strong, but not just
too.
Yeah, strong, but not just for his build. Just a strong player in general in terms of setting the edge, taking on blocks, stacking and shedding. Takes great pride in playing the run. You could just tell that on his film. Attacks blocks with physicality, creates extension on contact. First step get off is really special. One of the bendier players in this class on contact. Just does a good job consistently threatening the outside shoulder to tackle. Really fluid athlete, redirects, change directions with ease. Can use him. We saw him be used on stunts, twists, stuff like that. So that he's going to be a huge asset in that regard. My only negatives, man, is just like, is how translatable is his size? That's the thing. We don't really see 6'3", average length pass rushers with this type of build. We just really don't in the NFL. So he's definitely an outlier in that regard, but he does an excellent job using his hands, using the length that he's given. The run defense is a non-concern for me right now. I have this thing with prospects, like I try not to make issues out of stuff that isn't on film.
Yeah.
And his run defense is not a problem on film. It's a strength. So I'm not going to knock him because it could potentially be a problem in the league. I acknowledge that that's a possibility, but there's unknowns with every prospect, man. The film is the film. His run defense film is as good or better than like 99% of trench players in this class. So it's not an issue for me. He is a guy that's a top 10 player in this class for me. I am a huge believer in his talent. I think he gives you a high floor because of the intangibles, because of what he can already do as a run defender, as an athlete. And I just think the ceiling is pretty high because of his unbelievable athleticism. So huge
You
Nolan
mentioned
Smith
the
fan.
intangibles, by the way. He is one of the most well-spoken like individuals. Like you just listen to him in interviews and just like how
Oh,
much he
he was
stands
the
up.
best interview at the combine by far.
I
Best guy
I
that I talked to.
I would I just love like guys like that who just like clearly have the right head on their shoulders and they're smart but they also stand up for their teammates really well. I think he's a guy who's just going to be such a welcome presence in the locker room. I've been looking at the Falcons at 8. I just think they're going to go either Carter or they're going to go Nolan Smith. I think they really like those two overall. And
Yeah.
one last note on Nolan Smith before we get to number 1. His true pass rush win rate was a 32.4, which is it was pretty sizable, but he only had like 10 total rushes this
Yeah.
year from from a from a true pass rush perspective. So like but he had like 6 hurries, 3 QB hits, and he had a sack off that. Like there's clearly upside there, and there's clearly maybe a little more nuance than we understand. Like, Smith has talked before, like if I just attacked more, you guys would see that production. You don't really see it at Georgia all that often.
For sure. For sure. All right, number 1 guy. I mean, I know we both have the same players, so let's talk
I want to
about
hear
it.
you go first on him. I want to hear what you have to say overall on Will
Man,
Anderson.
this is a guy that I just don't really understand in terms of why people are starting to like overthink him. And I say like overthinking, like obviously I know that people are still saying he's gonna go, maybe the second edge rusher off the board, but not him not being a consensus first edge rusher or defender off the board, given Jalen Carter's, some of his maturity issues, I guess, is just baffling to me. Anderson, incredibly productive. Just you look at what he did, guys that start at Alabama as freshmen, always stick out to me because, it's a loaded roster. If you can come in right away and like win a job and not just win a job, but Anderson was incredibly productive even as a freshman. I think he had like 7 or 8 sacks. So, he was an early breakout guy. 6'4", 245 pounds. He came in a little bit heavier at the combine than I think some people were anticipating. But again, kind of like Smith, even though his frame is a little bit lean, he packs like a punch. I think he is a good run defender as well. Alabama would literally put him with his hand in the dirt as a 3 tech. He would
Yeah.
hold up and run defense. That was the stuff over the summer that I remember going like, whoa, this is different. The fact that he can do this at, he was listed 235. I don't know what he was playing at, but the fact that he can hold up against the run, I like that a lot. Really good get off the line of scrimmage. Consistently can threaten the outside shoulder, but like really, it's just speed to power, speed to power, speed to power. Uses his hands really well, attacks the hands of the offensive tackles really well. He loves that like forklift technique. He plays an unbelievable amount of snaps. And if you look at the production, like the box score production or the overall production that he's put up over the course of his career is elite, doesn't even really do it justice. But when you factor in the fact that he has the ability, the conditioning, the just the body to hold up and play, 80, 90 plus % snaps, I think that's incredibly valuable. This is a dude who does not need to come off the field. Very good run defender. I think his run defense is getting underrated through the process. I think he has more nuance as a pass rusher than people are willing to admit. I just don't think that he wins in the ways that we usually see for guys built like him.
Yes, I
It's
completely agree.
I've seen this comp and I see similarities in the way they win as a rusher. I'm not saying he will be this player, but Khalil Mack, they
That
rush very similarly.
I have that written down too.
Yeah. Just the overall forklift, the ability to convert speed to power. It over the summer when I was studying him and just the ways that he wins, it reminded me a lot of Mack. Anderson, another guy, like talk about Nolan Smith on those stunts or twists. You give Anderson a runway or let him shoot gaps, it is a terrifying thing. The closing speed, the ability to get upfield quickly, change the direction. I mean, the athleticism, everything's there for me. He is one of the very few. I think right now I've got like 3 to 4 blue chip prospects that I'm really willing to label as blue chip prospects. And he's the number one player for me on my board. So I don't get it. I think if you're overthinking him, I just don't understand it. That's just my opinion.
I fully agree with you. Like you talk about his run defense, and I don't think there's a better run defender in this class in terms of how consistent he gets in, controls the line of scrimmage. He makes sure like he has the leverage advantage. Like he keeps his like his hand in the chest. Something I love when guys have the length. A lot of guys, they like to try to hold the edge with like one arm and then they try to tackle with the other. Anderson has so many instances where he uses the one arm and he tries to make those plays, and you can really trust him to anchor your run defense overall. And you mentioned the speed to power, like that's his go-to. The only time he didn't really convert off of it enough was against Darnell Wright, and that's worth noting because Wright's like humongous, but I think it's something to keep in mind that Tennessee runs this extremely high tempo offense,
Mm-hmm.
and he's playing all those snaps. So it's really tough for him to, be able to rush with the same level snap to snap. So I definitely think there's a little bit of context. And I don't think people understand. He's getting doubled, chipped by tight ends, running backs, like different, like even guards and stuff like that. Like he is commanding so much attention. There's such a level of respect each team has, and I think you have to you have to appreciate that as an evaluator, and that's something I really like about Will Anderson. I don't I don't know if he just doesn't rely on his bend as much, but I think he relies on softening the edge more with his hands, and as opposed to trying
He
to go
does.
trying to ghost under tackles, which I wonder if he can do, or if he just does, if he just doesn't choose to do it, cuz I do think his pass rush plan is fine for what it is. I think he has good usage of his hands. I think the speed to power is good, works off of that. I do think there's room for upside there
Definitely. Yeah,
in
definitely.
terms of the production, like as early on. I don't think it quite matches the production numbers, but there's still a good amount there that you feel very comfortable with his projection overall. I
Yeah,
definitely think it's he's not this Miles Garrett type of prospect. I think we make
I
this
agree.
mistake a ton
Yeah,
of times because we try to think there's a generational prospect every single year, and it's just not that.
yeah.
But Will Anderson is going to be he's going to be the linchpin of your defense. He's going to be absolutely like the absolute leader. Like I think the Cardinals would be absolutely crazy to not take anyone but him at 3.
Yeah, I agree, man. Yeah, the pass rush plan, like he needs to continue to develop his move set, which is something that
Mhm.
Khalil did as well. Like when he got into the league, you really saw, I feel like, Max toolkit of moves take off his last year in Oakland before he went to Chicago. But the things that Anderson can already do with his hands, I think that like you said, I think there's more than enough there, and he can continue to expand on that. He can sequence moves together, which I appreciate too.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of negatives on his film, aside from if you just want like some bigger edge rusher or like a guy that can, kick inside at the next level or, can play as like a 5 tech or something like that, then yeah, Anderson's probably not going to be for you. But if you're looking for like just a stand up wide nine type of edge rusher who's going to play, in those type of alignments, I just don't see how you could want anybody else. I really don't. But that's why we got opinions. It would be boring
Yeah.
if everybody agreed. So
I mean, I get the missed tackles argument with him, but
sure,
like
yeah, a
it's
little
not
bit,
it's
wound up
yeah.
sometimes.
And
So
I get that, but there's just so much good there. You just can't like not every weakness is the same. You could have like more weaknesses written down, but it they don't mean as much as like say a guy who's like you're writing down, oh, he's raw. Like people don't understand that, and I think it's important that while we can write down and nitpick, these guys to death, they're going to get better. And, blue chip guys like Will Anderson, who have come from a great program and are constantly working and have great intangibles, you project them to get better. And
yeah.
you already see them as a good player. So that's why they're a blue chip.
Yeah. So good stuff, man. Good stuff. It was a fun episode. I enjoyed talking about edge rushers. That's one of my favorite positions to study. So a lot of good players in this class. It should be interesting to see like where these guys end up on draft day. I'm excited to get into that when that comes about. But appreciate you guys checking out the episode. Just again, please make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/all Steelers talk. We'll be back next week. I'm not sure what position group we're going to do, but I'll try to tweet it out later in the week, whatever we're going to cover. So appreciate you guys checking us out. Y'all have a good week.
Peace.